Bending over my wedding dress, I ran my fingertips over the delicate lace, feeling its slight roughness under the pads. A dress that seemed like a dream come true, made especially for me, with impeccable draperies and elegant seams. And here it was, perfectly white, vulnerable as love itself, suddenly turned out to be spoiled. Its collar and sleeves, previously so spotlessly snow-white, were now covered with something sticky, as if deliberately spoiled by someone's evil hand. I looked back at my sister Elizabeth, whose lips were twisted in a mocking smile, barely noticeable, but so obvious that my heart froze. "I'll just say it's crazy," Elizabeth said in a barely audible voice, but her words sounded like a bolt from the blue. "An ordinary-looking woman like you is getting married before me. You'll look better in this old dress, and even the groom and the guests will tell you to your face." Through the anger and humiliation, I felt something in me tearing apart. Looking back on our childhood years, it seemed to me that Elizabeth always aspired to be the first, but she never seemed to me evil or cruel. She laughed and played with me, but now that there was a question of my happiness, Elizabeth became almost a stranger, cold, contemptuous and cruel. At that moment, my eyes filled with tears, which I immediately suppressed, giving my face a calm expression. I was 30, and for 5 years Fred and I had been building our relationship, learning from each other, getting closer, overcoming difficulties. We have recently applied for marriage registration, and the wedding day is getting closer. I put my whole soul into the preparation, carefully thinking through the invitations, choosing flower arrangements to create a warm, cozy atmosphere that reflects the two of us. Yes, I have dreamed of a white dress since childhood. I dreamed of becoming a bride who, perhaps, for a moment dazzle everyone with her modest beauty. When I first saw this dress in the window, so delicate, with the finest lace and iridescent train, I knew that it was created for me. "I think this dress suits you best, Amy," Fred said the first time I tried it on in front of the mirror. "It was your dream, right? You've been saving up for him for so long." Fred's warm words wrapped around my heart like a soft blanket in the winter cold. "Yes, this is a special day, and I will wear the dress I chose with confidence," I replied to him then, feeling this confidence awaken inside, despite Elizabeth's poisonous words. But with every step of the preparations for the wedding, Elizabeth became more openly angry. In moments of silence, when I came home tired after work, she often waited for me in the living room, as if on purpose to throw another caustic comment. She was 3 years younger than me, the kind of person who wouldn't walk past a mirror without admiring herself, confident in her reflection, carefully chosen appearance. Being around her often made me feel, as she once put it, plain. She always joked in front of my friends and family, as if she found pleasure in it. Her sarcastic comments like, "My older sister is ugly," have become almost familiar to me over time. We both knew she was joking, but each time it caused its own little prick, leaving me with feelings that I couldn't banish. I could hardly believe that someone could bring pain so easily. My hand froze on the doorknob when I saw Elizabeth with her haughty grin, so serene and seemingly indifferent to what was happening. She slowly straightened up, ostentatiously straightening her long, dark locks, as if she was preparing to go on stage. Her bag, small, elegant, embroidered with stones, as if she was not just a guest, but the hostess of this event, hung on her shoulder. She pushed it up on her elbow and, without taking her eyes off me, cheekily said, "Oh, Amy, finally." Her voice sounded velvety, but cold as icy water. "I think you'll be surprised when you see that I've helped you prepare a little." Her words made me feel a strange mixture of anxiety and anger. "What did you do, Elizabeth?" The question almost escaped my lips, but I couldn't let her feel the power over my emotions. I just gritted my teeth and stepped inside the closet. Elizabeth stopped in the doorway, eyeing me like a cat playing with prey. "You've always been so in awe of the mirror, haven't you?" Elizabeth crossed her legs, leaning on the door jamb, not taking her eyes off it. "Well, anyway, good luck to you. Although, to be honest, you're wearing a dress. Well, I'm not sure it suits you." Her words were poison spreading inside. She said it as if in passing, but I knew that every sound was designed to make me doubt. Elizabeth turned and disappeared into the hallway, leaving me in the dressing room, tense as a taut string. I closed the door behind me, and for a moment, silence enveloped me. Taking a deep breath, I turned to the mirror to admire the wedding dress for the last time before the ceremony. But as soon as I looked at my reflection, something dark and unpleasant pierced my mind. Dress. It no longer looked as dazzling as it had during the fitting. Strange folds appeared on it, and the lace, so flawless earlier, seemed to have lost its lightness. Horror ran down my spine. I carefully smoothed the fabric at the waist, hoping that it was just an accident, that the dress might just not fit well. But deep down I knew that wasn't the case. The mirror reflected me, insecure and vulnerable. I clutched the fabric on my chest, trying to regain at least a grain of my former confidence, but the anxiety did not leave me. I heard a muffled rustle behind me and turned around. Fred's mother appeared in the doorway, her face glowing with warmth, and it seemed to awaken me from a veil of gloomy thoughts. "Amy, honey, I just came by to ask if you were okay. You look a little worried." Her eyes were full of genuine concern. I nodded, trying to hide my doubts. This woman was always kind to me. Her warmth and understanding filled me with the warmth I needed so much. "It's okay," I replied, lifting the corners of my lips in a faint but sincere smile. "It's just a nervous tension, I guess." She gave me a reassuring look and quietly touched my hand. "You look great, Amy. Let no one make you doubt it." She gently squeezed my hand. Her words were a strong shield against all the malicious whispers of Elizabeth. These words restored my strength, but I still felt vaguely uneasy. When I was alone, I slid my hand over my dress, reminding myself that this day was mine, that Elizabeth couldn't ruin it. But her shadow, no matter how hard I tried to get rid of it, continued to be there, waiting for the moment to disrupt my fragile happiness again. My mother-in-law's words pierced me like a thin ray of light breaking through a dark cloud of despair. I stood with my arms wrapped around myself, not knowing how to react to what was being offered. A spare dress? I've never heard of him before. In a room where a heavy sense of loss seemed to be in the air, her offer sounded almost like salvation. "Amy," she said softly, approaching me and looking at me with some special warmth and understanding, "I have a dress that will become a truly faithful companion for you this day. It may not be as luxurious as what you have chosen, but it is worthy of you, and perhaps even more significant than you can imagine." I stared at her in confusion. All this time, all my efforts and dreams were focused on the one dress in which I saw the embodiment of my ideal. I'd been preparing for so long, imagining every moment of our ceremony with trepidation. And now that everything had collapsed, her words sounded like a faint hope that I wanted to cling to, but the despair was too deep to let go so easily. My mother-in-law noticed my confusion and gently hugged me by the shoulders. Her hands, warm and soothing, seemed to promise that whatever happened, it would be possible to overcome. "It's not just a dress," she continued, her voice getting a little louder, and I sensed her determination. "This is the dress I wore to my wedding, Amy. And," she paused for a moment, a little embarrassed, "I secretly prepared it for you, knowing that anything could happen. I wanted to offer it, but only if you don't mind." At first I couldn't believe my ears. This is not just a dress, but a family heirloom that connects generations, gives strength and deep meaning. I looked at her in silence, and all the moments that her son and I had experienced together flashed through my head, and her support, her kind words at every step made our relationship with Fred stronger and deeper. "I don't even know what to say," I exhaled, feeling like gratitude fills the heart. She smiled, and there was a glint of pride and love in her eyes. It seemed that her eyes were talking about unspoken things, as if this moment was an opportunity to convey something important that lies beyond simple words. "I would be honored if you would accept this dress, Amy," she said, and I could see a note of excitement tremble in her voice. "It symbolizes what belongs to the family." Now that you are becoming a part of our lives, it will also be your symbol. We will do everything to make you look perfect, even more than you expected." She went to the closet in the corner of the room and pulled out a long, neatly packed case, carefully untying the silk ribbon. When she opened it, a dress looked at me, surprisingly simple, but with exquisite elegance. The soft, flowing lines of the fabric, the thin snow-white silk, shimmering in the light, created an aristocratic, but almost mystical impression. It looked like an image from another time, as if it contained the story itself, passed down from generation to generation. "You'll be beautiful in it," she said softly, handing the dress to me. "Today is your day, and it will keep you as it kept me." Tremulously, I touched the fabric, feeling its softness and almost living warmth. Time seemed to stand still. The whole world around him became just a vague background, blurry and muffled, like someone's dream that was about to end. Elizabeth, elegant and well-groomed, but filled with anger, took off and rushed towards me with desperate determination, completely losing her composure. I stood motionless, trying to keep calm, although a storm of fear, bewilderment, and bitterness raged inside me. The smiles of the guests slowly faded, their faces turned into masks expressing a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. I saw my father step forward, ready to intervene, and my mother-in-law, who was standing nearby, peered at Elizabeth with an expression of obvious condemnation and barely noticeable alarm. When Elizabeth came close to me, her face was burning with indignation and resentment, but in her eyes there was not only rage, but also some kind of almost childish sadness, a spark of envy and resentment, which, as I realized, had lived in her for many years. She grabbed my wrist, tightly, so that I could feel the cold of her hand and her strained breathing. "You've always been a favorite, always lucky," she hissed through her teeth, her eyes burning with an intensity that seemed almost unhealthy. "Why is it always you? Why don't you care? You're simple, unremarkable, and yet everyone looks at you like you're a star, and no one notices me." I finally found the strength to answer her, and my words were quiet but firm. "Elizabeth, this is not a competition, and it never has been. It was hard for me too, but I never wanted to take anything away from you. It's my wedding day, my happiness day, and I wish you'd just be happy for me. I love you, sister, but if you can't understand this..." She abruptly released my wrist, as if my words disgusted her. Her eyes narrowed, and she clenched her fists, barely holding back a flash of rage. However, there was something broken in her gaze now, some remnant of vulnerability that I might not have noticed before. "You don't deserve to be happy," she whispered, looking at me as if I were her sworn enemy. "And I will do everything to make you feel what it's like to be unnoticed and humiliated." The guests, who had unwittingly witnessed this scene, whispered, shifting from one foot to the other, clearly confused and puzzled. Everyone seemed to understand that Elizabeth's words pierced my heart and became a blow for me, which is hard to recover from. And then my mother-in-law, always calm and wise, stepped forward and, putting her hand on my shoulder, turned to Elizabeth with restraint but kindness. "Elizabeth, you got the opportunity to be near on this important day for your sister. She invited you with an open heart, and I ask you not to ruin this moment. Sisters should support each other, not create unnecessary wounds." Elizabeth hesitated for a second, gave us one last angry look and, without saying another word, turned around and left. Her footsteps sounded loud in the silent hall, and I watched her go, realizing that this might be the last time she was a part of something important to me. The hall was filled with silence, and I, feeling the excitement and pain slowly dissolve into a bright, long-awaited joy, turned to Fred, who was next to me, silently supporting me. We exchanged a glance, and I realized that now nothing can overshadow the happiness of this day. Fred's words hung in the air, slowly enveloping the space between us. The guests listened to his every word with bated breath. Some glanced furtively at each other, sharing sincere admiration or relief at how accurately and touchingly he described our feelings. I stood next to him, feeling the warmth of his hand, confidently squeezing mine, penetrate me and dissolve the traces of uncertainty that the meeting with Elizabeth had left. Elizabeth froze, her face turned slightly pale, and for a moment something elusively fragile flashed in her eyes, like the ghost of her lost hopes and some secret, unfulfilled dreams. Her audacity faded for a second, but she quickly found the strength, pursing her lips and straightening her back so as not to show everyone else that she was offended by these words. "I don't understand," she said, looking around the room with a look that was a mixture of resentment and stubbornness. "I don't understand how you can choose someone so boring and ordinary when there are so many girls around who could give you a real life, someone more beautiful, more confident, more—" She trailed off, obviously not finding the right words that could express her disappointment. Fred smiled and replied without losing the gentleness with which she had spoken before. "Elizabeth, the fact is that real beauty is not only appearance, but also the soul and actions. Amy is the person who sees in me not only status or money, but also the real me. She doesn't demand more from me than I can give, doesn't force me to play a role that is alien to me. And for the sake of such people, I want to do anything." He looked at me with a smile, and I felt the light and peace that I had been missing for so long spreading inside me. Elizabeth seemed to feel even more hurt by his words, her rage mixed with disappointment, which she couldn't seem to completely contain. She was about to say something, but Fred's mother came forward again. Her face remained calm, but there was firmness in her voice. "Elizabeth, everyone has to find their own happiness, and Amy and Fred have found their own in each other. Sometimes life develops in such a way that it is necessary to let go of envy and allow the happiness of others to be their happiness, without making it their pain. You are still a young woman, you have many roads ahead of you, and I am sure that when you let go of the past and get rid of unnecessary resentments, you will be able to find your happiness." These words seemed to hurt Elizabeth even more. Her gaze softened, but this softening was short. She sighed heavily and took a step back, as if finally admitting defeat in the face of something she couldn't control. The guests watched her retreat in silence, but there was no condemnation in their eyes, but rather regret. The solemn melody started playing again, filling the hall with a lively and warm atmosphere. I turned to Fred, feeling our unity merge with every sound embracing us. "Elizabeth has gone into the shadows, but her image, her bitterness, and her pain will still pop up in my memory, leaving a mark in my heart. But now we had our day, our moment, and nothing could overshadow it." Elizabeth's words hung in the air, rough and prickly, like leaves torn off by the wind, which could not find peace. She continued to stare at me, her eyes narrowed in their skepticism, as if trying to punch a hole in my confidence. It was her defensive reaction, honed by years of audacity and attempts to stand out at the expense of humiliating others. But now I stood in front of her, firm, confident in my rightness and ready to finally put an end to her endless mockery. "Elizabeth," my voice sounded low but firm, drawing the attention of everyone around me. "Let's make one thing clear once and for all. It's not just a dress, it's a symbol of what I've been through and who I've become, despite your constant attempts to humiliate me. You tore my wedding dress to steal the joy from me on the day that was most important to me in the world. This is not just a joke, it is blasphemy, cruelty that undermines respect for you as a sister and as a person." Elizabeth seemed to barely catch the meaning of my words. Her gaze remained cold, even slightly annoyed, but behind it there was a faint flicker of uncertainty, like the reflection of a dying star that realizes the inevitable end. She probably didn't expect such a reaction from me, resolute, calm, and it knocked her off her usual rhythm. She tried to speak again, but her words were drowned in my firmness, not having time to give herself confidence. "I'm no longer someone you can just offend and leave feeling like it's all my fault," I continued, no longer hiding any resentment or disappointment. "I no longer need to endure your scenes, your attacks, your eternal humiliation. I found the strength to take a step forward, and you just stayed where you were, in your anger and envy. This day is my holiday, my happiness, and you are no longer allowed to ruin it." She obviously wanted to object again, but I raised my hand, calling her to silence. Annoyance flashed in her eyes again, but it seemed to me that something else was hiding behind it, maybe a shadow of fear, clumsily trying to hide behind a mask of indifference. "Do you want to know how much a wedding dress costs?" I asked with a grin. My voice was calm and firm, but there was already a fire raging inside me. The cost here is not only in money, but also in meaning, in the emotions that are associated with every centimeter of fabric. This dress of Fred's mother is his legacy, his memory. And what you destroyed cost me months of waiting, effort and work. Yes, you have to pay for it, not only with money, but also with the realization of how destructive and toxic your behavior is. Elizabeth gave me a dismissive look, and her lips curved into a sarcastic smile, but I didn't let her mockery break me. "It's not the dress you have to pay for, Elizabeth, it's the lesson. The lesson is that your behavior does not remain without consequences. Your anger, your attempts to humiliate me, all this will hit you. And if you're not ready to accept it now, then the day will come when you'll have to admit mistakes and see the true cost of your behavior." Time passed, and Elizabeth's life gradually began to fall apart, like a broken mirror reflecting her past actions. Her slumped shoulders, dull eyes, rumpled clothes, all this reflected the inner emptiness and despair into which she had plunged. Once, dressed in expensive fabrics and fashionable accessories, she was the queen of her small world, sophisticated but ruthless. Now her only ally was the dim light of her phone screen, where she posted posts full of regrets and resentments, trying in vain to regain at least a small part of her former brilliance. Despair was evident in every word of her publications. The friends who had previously enthusiastically supported her disappeared from her list of friends one by one. She seemed to have become a stranger in her own environment. Even her colleagues, who had previously looked at her with respect, now walked by with restraint, only occasionally casting pitying glances at her. Her appearance has changed beyond recognition. There is no trace of her former self-confidence and arrogance. She seemed to be dissolving into the shadow of her former reputation. As I watched her fall, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Yes, there was some justice in her fall, a punishment for everything she had done. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a little sad for my sister, who, instead of finding a path to happiness, stubbornly plunged into the abyss of her ambitions and disappointments. Her example became for me a kind of reminder of how important it is to build your happiness with honor and respect for others, without envy and malice. Meanwhile, peace reigned in my life. My wedding establishment was gaining popularity, and brides from all over the neighborhood came to me in search of the dress of their dreams. I spent long hours working with fabrics and lace, choosing special details for each outfit, creating images that will light up more than one wedding with joy. My mother-in-law, who supported me in a difficult moment, became not just an investor, but also a mentor whose experience and wisdom helped me overcome each new challenge. Every day, surrounded by silk, tulle, and sparkling strings of beads, I found special joy in my work. Seeing the bride's eyes light up as they try on my dresses has become a source of inspiration for me. This job was not only a way to recover, but also something that made my heart beat faster, filling my life with meaning. I kept returning to the memories of my wedding day, and these memories, despite everything, brought me peace. In my heart, I felt grateful to Fred, and to his mother, and even, in a strange way, to Elizabeth. The damage to my dress, which once seemed like a tragedy to me, has now become a starting point, giving me an understanding of what I really want.